Hi, this is Gary with MacMost Now. On today's episode, let's look at all the different ways that you can share music in iTunes with other users. So there are 5 primary methods for sharing iTunes music and media between different computers and devices in your home. First, you could use iTunes sharing, but you can also use a different function called iTunes home sharing. You could also share the entire media folder between users and computers, or you could share individual files between users and computers. And you can also use iTunes Match. Which method you want to use depends on exactly what you want to do and who you want to share your media with. So the simplest method is to turn on sharing. You go to iTunes Preferences, and in there you go to the Sharing tab and you turn on Share My Library. Now, what will happen then is other users on your same network, so other users in your house who have sharing turned on, will be able to see your iTunes library as long as your computer is on and iTunes is running. And then they could play, basically stream over your network, any song in your library. So they're not actually getting the song, they're just temporarily able to stream it. Now, similar to that, but it's actually completely separate functionality, is something called home sharing. So this is different. You go into Preferences, you go to Advanced, and you turn on Home Sharing. And when you do that, you have to enter in an Apple ID. And other computers on the same network that use the same Apple ID for home sharing will see each other and be able to stream music just like regular sharing. So for instance, I've turned on home sharing on this Mac and also on my MacBook Air. I click on it here over on the shared list over here, and I can see music, movies, all this stuff. This is all stuff stored on my MacBook Air, not here. Now I can double click on anything to play it, stream it, just like with regular sharing. But in addition to that, the cool thing is I could also select something and drag it into my regular library. So here's the shared library down here. This is my local library here. I can copy the music from the MacBook Air, which is what I'm viewing, over to my local iTunes library. So this ability to be able to copy items from other computers into your own iTunes library is the big difference between home sharing and regular sharing. Now, for some copy protected things, you may actually need to go into Store and authorize this computer for that Apple ID. So you can actually have multiple authorizations. So for instance, if you and your spouse both have your own Macs, you can authorize your account and your spouse's account on your Mac, and your account and your spouse's account on their Mac. Use home sharing to copy files back and forth, and since you're both authorized to play things from both accounts, everything should work. Now, in episode 631, I showed you how to take the iTunes media folder, which you can usually find. MacMost is my username here. You go down to Music, and you go into iTunes, and there's the media folder, and that's where all your stuff is stored. Now, you can actually place that in a shared location. So for instance, if I go into iTunes Preferences, and in Preferences here I go to Advanced, you see I've got this thing where I can set the location of the iTunes media folder. That's the location I just showed you. Now I can change that to somewhere else. So I can move my entire media folder to a shared location, say a network drive or a shared drive on my computer, and then other computers can actually use the same media folder. Now it's important to only do this if all the computers always have access to this media folder at all times. Which isn't usually the case unless you have a network drive. So this is best done if you're a single individual who has multiple Macs and you want to share that iTunes library across, say, user accounts on your own Mac or across multiple Macs that you own, maybe a network drive. This isn't really ideal for sharing something among other family members or people in your house. Now, suppose you want to share music between users, but you don't have duplicate copies of it. You don't want to have a copy in each iTunes library. What you could do then is turn off this key setting, copy files to iTunes media folder when adding to library. So what happens here is you've got in the Finder a media folder like I showed you before, and in there you've got your albums and your music. That's just yours. Now you can create in a shared location, like say under user shared, a folder, any name you want. I'll just call it My Music, and put music here. And these are just MP3 files. Now when you drag and drop these into iTunes, like so, what will happen is instead of them being copied into your library, the library will just link to them at the shared location. That's why it's important that the shared location be accessible at all times, so some sort of shared drive or Mac that's always on. Then multiple people can have access to the same music, but the actual MP3 files are in one location. But everybody's got separate iTunes libraries they can organize and create playlists and do all of that. In this case, if you download a new thing from iTunes, it will put it in the iTunes Media folder because that's where purchases get put. So you'd have to move it manually out of the iTunes Media folder into the shared location, and then users can drag and drop it into their copy of iTunes, and it will remain in that one spot that's shared. So this is the key thing. A lot of people make the mistake of trying to share their entire music folder or their entire iTunes library with everyone. And this leads to trouble because you've got multiple users trying to do things like maybe download apps, set up playlists, rate songs, do all sorts of organizational things. Instead, you should focus on sharing the media and everybody having their own iTunes library. So you've got the media in one place, you've turned off that copy to iTunes media folder option, and now people can share these MP3 files in their own library. The files are in one location, but everybody has their own library that accesses them. Now, if you don't have a network drive that's always on or a Mac that's always on, so everybody can always connect to it, then home sharing is probably your best bet. It does mean having duplicate copies of the music on each computer, but unless you have a massive iTunes library, it probably doesn't matter. And this way, you could travel with your Mac and have all your music available there. Now, if your goal is to share between Macs for one person, so all using the same Apple ID, then the ultimate solution now is iTunes Match, because not only do you have access across all your computers while at home, but you have access while you're away, since it's all stored in the cloud, and you're not cluttering up your hard drive with lots of music, because it's all in the cloud and you're accessing it as you need it. Another great thing about iTunes Match is it works on iOS devices, so you can use it on your iPhone and your iPad, and of course as well as your Apple TV. So plain iTunes sharing works best for just quickly streaming a song from one Mac to the other on a temporary basis. iTunes home sharing works best if you've got multiple users on multiple computers and you want to be able to share files between them, copying them from one machine to the other. And it also works great for streaming stuff to Apple TV and iOS devices. Sharing the entire media folder works best if you have a network drive or a Mac that's always on and always accessible to everybody, and you want everybody to have exactly the same music in all of their iTunes libraries. Now, just sharing the media files by themselves, that works great if you also have something that's always on and available, and you want everybody to have different music in there. They can just basically pick and choose from a central location what music is in their library. And using iTunes Match works best if you've got just one user and you've got multiple devices and you want to have access to all your music everywhere, even away from your network. So there's a look at 5 different ways to share your iTunes media. Till next time, this is Gary with MacMost Now. Want more video tutorials? Just go to MacMost.com, click on the videos link at the top of the page, and then you can view all of the hundreds of MacMost videos by category.